Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. It is a beautiful Thursday, June 4th, on the Marc McMain Show, and my name is Taylor Hawkins. I'm filling in for Mark as he is continuing to run his race. More on his race, by the way, later in the hour. But first, I want to highlight some elections that are taking place across the country, what that means for Georgia. And then in about 5 minutes, I'm going to be joined by a friend of mine who is running for lieutenant governor here in the state of Georgia, Greg Dolezal, who's the state senator from Forsyth County and has done some wonderful things. So I look forward to that interview. One of the things I wanted to mention is that it's crazy to see a time in which California elections may actually be somewhat in the running, so to speak, somewhat competitive for Republicans. That just highlights exactly how bad the Democrats, how bad the left has governed that state. But what we've seen and why this is relevant is we don't know what the results from that election are yet. And even though we are so many days out from that election, even Nate Silver and people like him, he's an independent, leans Democrat. He is an election analyst, widely respected on both sides of the aisle, but definitely left-leaning. Even he said it was ridiculous and reminiscent of the third world, just how slow California elections process. I mean, Germany, France, many countries around the world, and almost every state in the nation, if not every state, every single time, can yield their elections on a much shorter time frame than California. So that's really deplorable, honestly, a deplorable level of incompetence. But regardless, it is somewhat possible that Republicans will win the governorship of the state, and that's a race now pretty clearly between Steve Hilton, the Republican, and Xavier Becerra, who served in Joe Biden's cabinet. And the mayoral race in Los Angeles is also up for grabs. Spencer Pratt is the Republican there, and he's running against incumbent Mayor Karen Bass. And I think that's an interesting race to watch for two reasons. One is because Spencer is an interesting figure himself, and the other reason is he's a I should drill down on that. He is a former reality TV star. And, to be honest with you, I don't know how much he knows about the process of governing, but he's basically running as a normal person against the administration of Karen Bass, who allowed the city to burn down, who so mismanaged everything in that city, in one of the biggest and most beautiful cities in America, that a Republican is actually competitive when it's usually, I forget the exact details, 70-30, 80-20 Democrat. I mean, it is unbelievably massive margin for Democrats there, and a Republican is actually competitive. That just highlights exactly how poorly Karen Bass has run that district. And frankly, it shows how poorly she is thought of, that she couldn't win this outright as an incumbent and as a Democrat against a Republican. So they are both of those races, Spencer Pratt versus Karen Bass in the Los Angeles mayoral race, as well as the governorship. Both of those are probably headed to a runoff, and it is going to be crazy to see the potential. The potential, again, it's not a likelihood, I would say, but the potential of a Republican in both of those seats. It would definitely be a huge upset. The other reason I think it's interesting to highlight this is because we here in Georgia are also seeing a absolute crazy mess of a mayor having a resurgence, and that is Keisha Lance Bottoms, or as she was affectionately referred to post-COVID, Keisha Crime Wave Bottoms, who is running for governor and is the Democratic nominee for governor here in the state of Georgia. She sat by and did nothing when riots claimed lives and burned buildings to the ground here in Georgia in the summer of 2020. And frankly, so many things that she did are just undeniably foolish and incompetent. Clearly displays the fact that she is sold out to the ideological radicals in her party and chose to put ideology over good governance. I mean, one of the things that she did, of course, the summer of 2020 was the whole George Floyd incident took place, and the whole nation, in a sense, was caught up in the conflagration surrounding that and the riots that took place because of what was said to be what took place in that. I won't say even what took place because there is a variety of controversy over that, but it is clear, it is crystal clear that in my mind, that was not an instance of police brutality that could be, used as sort of a nationwide scandal or basis for a nationwide scandal about police brutality. But that is the way that our nation took it, and that is what happened. And instead of stepping in to defend her people, the people of Atlanta, where she is elected to govern them, Keisha Lance Bottoms allowed the city to burn. she not only did that, but the people she prosecuted weren't the rioters and the people causing damage and the people endangering the lives of Georgia citizens. The people she prosecuted were the cops who tried to step in and help provide, the law-abiding citizens with protection. And so she saw massive amounts of outflow from the police force in Atlanta, which further endangered the population of Atlanta. And that is just the tip of the spear, tip of the iceberg, I should say, for all of the damaging and destructive policies that she pursued when she was mayor. In fact, it's interesting to look at the electoral results from the Democratic primary. She underperformed in Atlanta counties where you would think because she was mayor that she would do better. She did worse. And that just highlights the fact that Democrats don't like her. And it's the Democrats outside of Atlanta who know nothing about her who thought she might be a good candidate. So yeah, just as Karen Bass was a royal failure with regard to Los Angeles and how her failure was so complete that a Republican is actually has a chance at winning the Los Angeles mayoral race, so we have a failed candidate in Keisha Lance Bottoms. Well, we are now joined by a friend of mine, State Senator Greg Dolezal, who is running for lieutenant governor, and a great pivot. I'm sure he has some thoughts on what Keisha Lance Bottoms what her governorship would mean for Georgia. He is running as a Republican for the runoff here in Georgia for lieutenant governor, and he represents portions of North Georgia in the state Senate. He's a friend of mine. We've worked together on a number of issues when I was a lobbyist there at the state capitol, and has become one of the most prominent conservative voices in Georgia. In his time in office, he's championed school choice, election legislation, tax reform, and so many other issues, and he is now seeking to become Georgia's next lieutenant governor, a role that also serves as presiding officer of the state Senate and just plays a huge role in shaping the legislation here in the state of Georgia. Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
Taylor, so great to have you on. I love hearing you on the radio, man. Love the new gig.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun getting to help folks in my area keep up with what's going on, both in our state and our nation. So I was just talking about the comparisons between Karen Bass in Los Angeles and Keisha Lance Bottoms here in Georgia. Both failed candidates who would bring ruin and destruction if they continued to serve. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I remember being at the state capitol. I'm walking out of my office in the middle of the so-called peaceful protests of 2020, and State Patrol was laying out their riot gear and their body armor, preparing for what they believed was going to be a siege on the state capitol. And that image is forever seared in my mind as the legacy of Keisha. But the other image that's seared in my mind is the young girl, Sequoia Turner, who was murdered in the autonomous zone at the Wendy's that Keisha allowed to be stood up and never addressed until after an 8-year-old girl who was driving home with her mother was shot and killed. And Keisha has blood on her hands. It's shameful that she's even running to be the governor of this great state. But frankly, for Republicans, she's the best candidate that we could ask for to be the standard bearer for the Democrats, because these were people that wanted to defund the police, allowed the riots to happen, allowed the autonomous zones to be stood up, and they bent their knee to the woke Antifa members, and that is not what Georgians want in their next governor.
That's for sure. That's for sure. And I think it's not what they want in their next lieutenant governor either. And it's shaping up to be an interesting fight as well, depending on who wins both the Republican and the Democrat runoffs here in the state. But I know that the issues surrounding both good governance and ideological conservatism versus ideological leftism have both been things that you engaged in heavily in your state Senate, in the time that you were in the state Senate. So talk to me about that. What about your record do you want to highlight, you want people to take away when they're thinking about who to vote for in this next election?
Yeah, I think that we're actually in a fight to save the West. I used to say that I thought that we were in a fight to save America. I've broadened that in my talking points now, because I believe that we are fighting the neo-Marxists and the socialists who want to turn America into a socialist panacea. And so the stuff that I've championed has been really simple. I fought for school choice because I believe that parents, not bureaucrats, should be in charge of the children's education. Last year, I wrote the Riley Gaines Act and partnered with your former organization and a number of others to ensure that we do not have men in women's sports or women's locker rooms.
That's right.
This year, I introduced a bill to ban Sharia law in the state of Georgia to ensure that what we see happening in places like Dallas, Texas, never happens here in the state of Georgia. And and have been really raising the flag lately, Taylor, on this data center issue. We've got these massive corporate carve-outs and tax giveaways that have turned on an electromagnet to draw data centers here to the state of Georgia. My opponent voted for these tax incentives twice. I voted against them. I do not believe in corporate welfare. I want to eliminate the state income tax for every Georgian, and we cannot do that when we're giving billions of dollars away to Blackstone and Google and Amazon.
I'd love to drill down on that point. I know there's a number of people who instinctively agree with you, as do I. And I'd love to highlight maybe, could you talk a bit about your personal opinion and governing philosophy when it comes to balancing economic development, which to many Georgians, I think many normal Americans, is kind of a closed book. It's a hazy topic. They're not really sure what it means in terms of, like, what benefit does economic development, in air quotes, yield to them, and what happens when local or state governments kind of put their interests to the side in pursuit of just better numbers, quote unquote.
Yeah, so the best way I could describe it is the traditional government-engaged economic development means that bureaucrats and politicians play private equity investor. And they meddle in the free market. They pick one industry that they want to help. They pour taxpayer money into that industry, and they prop it up artificially. And whether that's, you've seen that happen in Georgia with the film industry, we've seen it happen with the data center industry. And the problem with building businesses that way, and this happened in the film industry, is the second that somebody else has a better deal, the industry leaves the state and they're gone. And what I would much rather do is get the politicians out of the business of playing investor, lower the tax rate for everyone. I'm a small business owner. I've started multiple companies. We employ hundreds of people across those companies here in Georgia. About 80% of Georgians work for small and mid-sized companies. Most of those companies never get a tax break or a tax credit that a lobbyist is advocating for at the Capitol. And if we lower Georgia's rate from being the highest in the Southeast to zero on the income tax side, that will turn on an electromagnet to attract more business investment here. And that is the kind of economic development I want to see. Empower the free market to do what the free market does best, which is to allow the successful companies to thrive and get out of the business of picking winners and losers.
It's something that I definitely feel like not everyone on the right remembers, that this is a core conservative principle. I mean, to reject the idea of the government picking winners and losers, to strengthen the free markets, core conservative idea. But I think it's so much easier when someone becomes an elected official to be able to point to some big development that has kind of their name on it, so to speak, and say, I brought X number of jobs, instead of being able to confidently look at the way that they have broadened freedom and lowered government regulations, government burden on the normal Georgian. It's so much easier to just be able to point to the shiny object, and so people do that in the name of building their own legacy instead of protecting what's best for Georgia. Wouldn't you say that's the case?
I cringe whenever I hear a politician say they created a single job, because government does not create a single job. What government does is it extracts money from people via taxation. And when it's overreaching like this, it then redistributes that to the favored son. And the favored son is usually whoever gives campaign money or has a lobbyist or, somehow convinces a politician to benefit their industry. And that, frankly, is just not the role of government. Job creators like myself create jobs. The government does not create jobs. And the role of the government is to allow me to compete on a level playing field. And I've started some businesses that have not been successful, and that's okay. And I've started, thankfully, more than that have been successful, and that's the American dream. However, you take one step closer to socialism every time you try to have bureaucrats manage that process artificially. So true, so true. And I appreciate you highlighting that. It's important to do what's best for all of Georgia. It doesn't mean that when we're talking about the data centers and all of these other things where there have been massive government giveaways, the answer to that is not to shut down economic development or to prevent Georgia from being competitive, but to make it competitive in the best ways possible, which are ways that are level the playing field for everybody and make sure that the government is not picking winners and losers. Senator, I'd love to drill down maybe a little more on parental rights and school choice. It's definitely something you spent a lot of time on, and it's something that helps the most vulnerable people in a lot of areas that are also forgotten about, just as maybe in the economic development conversation, the normal Georgian is forgotten about. So could you talk about why that is so important to you? Yeah, I think the best way for me to do that would be to talk about my own family. My wife and I have 4 kids between the ages of 8 and 14 years old. And God has gifted them each very, very differently. And the problem with one-size-fits-all public education is we educate children based on the year in which they were born, not based on a customized education plan that elevates their giftedness. So my 6th grade son probably should be in my 8th grade daughter's math class, and my 8th grade daughter probably should be in about a 7th grade math class. And that's okay, because she should be in about a 9th grade social studies class.
Yeah.
But that customization does not happen in our public school system. And we're living in a reality right now where 2/3 of Georgia's 3rd graders, which is the year that we test them for reading proficiency, do not read on a 3rd grade level. Only 29% of our 3rd graders are reading on the 3rd grade level. So our public school system has significant challenges. We are addressing those. We are trying to help them level up. But one of the best ways that you help them level up is you put them in a competitive environment, because there is no area where a monopoly is the best answer to serve people. Competition breeds innovation. And the public education system has not really innovated over the last 30 years, other than putting a digital whiteboard in the front of the classroom as opposed to a chalkboard. And I believe that it is the role of the parent who has the role of raising their family to help find the best education system for the child's needs. In some cases, that may be homeschool. In some cases, that may be private school. In some cases, that may be a co-op school. In a lot of cases, that will be public school. But most often, that's going to be different things for different children, and allowing those parents to take their state tax dollars and pursue the educational opportunity that will best serve the child is the best investment that Georgians can make in educating the next generation.
Folks, you're listening to Senator Greg Dolezal, who's running for lieutenant governor, here on the Marc McMain Show with your host, Taylor Hawkins. And I'm asking questions about the senator's policy positions and personal governing philosophy. So, Greg, thank you so much for the time. Time for a couple closing questions, one of which is, I think, gets back to what you said at the beginning of the interview, which I love to hear people talk about, because there's no level of governance at which it is not appropriate to see and to start to push back against the existential crisis that the West is facing, where we have an onslaught of people who hate this nation, hate our values, hate Western values in general, and who want to see them abolished. So perhaps could you talk a little bit more about how you would like to use the lieutenant governor's position to push back against the fall of the West, or the impending fall of the West, and make sure that we keep our nation and our state great?
Yeah, I look at this thing called the Red-Green Alliance, which is basically this, well, it's colloquially called that, and it's the idea that the Islamists and the socialists are joining forces to tear down the West. And you see that happening throughout Western Europe. And the way that I talk about this with on the stump is, I say it is okay to say that not all countries are created equal and not all cultures are created equal, because they are not. And the founding principles of America, that we are endowed by God with certain inalienable rights, that we have the right to a trial by jury, that we have the right to free speech, that we have the right to self-preservation through the Second Amendment. Those are uniquely American ideas that are not shared by everybody. And when you import millions of people from foreign cultures who hold values that do not comport with those values, you are disrupting the culture of America. And certainly one of those ideas and cultures that do not comport with the United States Constitution is Sharia law. And so I introduced a bill in the Georgia State Senate this year to ban all foreign laws, but it was with an eye towards Sharia, because if we look at places like Dallas, Texas, we see the Islamic tribunal that has been set up outside of Dallas, Texas, where they adjudicate family law cases and business law cases, not according to the United States Constitution, but according to the precepts of Sharia law. And I want to ensure that that never happens here in the state of Georgia. Republicans and Democrats have both criticized me on that, but it's something I'm taking a bold stand on, because I do believe that we are in about a 10-year window of being able to fight back against this and ensure that when America sees our 350th anniversary 100 years from now, that she looks the way that she looked today, as opposed to becoming a socialist dystopian society.
That is so true and so good. I really appreciate what you're doing there, because one of the things I'm going to talk about in the rest of the show was the degree to which foreign immigrants are involved in the Medicaid fraud scandals, which have cost this nation billions and billions of dollars over the last decade, because we're importing people from low trust societies with no notion of private property rights whatsoever, no shared values, and then we're incorporating them into a system where we have created massive welfare benefits in a high trust society based on specific values of care for the elderly and the poor, and the massive abuse that has taken place. And that is just one instance, and you highlighted something that's even more important, which is the abuse of justice that takes place when there is a dual law system competing with our laws, which are duly passed here in Georgia and at the national level. So it's definitely a multifaceted problem, and I just appreciate hearing somebody tackle it in a full-throated way, because I mean it is a dangerous situation we face here in America, and I think that conservatives who cower from it honestly have their head in the sand.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are afraid to talk about this because you're afraid of being called some name by the media or the Democrats. And so I think it's something largely that conservatives see happening, but they don't know how to talk about it. And so I'm frankly trying to help give my colleagues language with which they can talk about it, because I think that they want to talk about it, but they don't know how to. So I've been kind of the first guy out of the gate. I am on a lot of these issues, the first guy out of the gate. On the Riley-Gaines Act, that was another example where people didn't really know how to talk about the issue, but we helped put some framing and some language around it that helped get our colleagues comfortable with it. We moved that through the legislature and got it passed. But we heard the same criticisms, that we're hearing on Sharia law with the Riley-Gaines Act. Well, how many men are competing in women's sports? Is this really a problem? Why are you even talking about this? This only happens very, very sporadically. Well, how many people are trying to bring Sharia law to Georgia? Is that really a thing? Is it a problem? It's the same concept that we want to be in front of these issues before we're trying to play catch up and it's too late.
That's exactly right. I love the verse in one of Paul's epistles where he says that a man's job is to look out for, when he says provide for his own, that word provide means to look out for in advance the problems that face his family. And the same is true of governing officials in God's institution of government, that they are to look out for in advance and not just play catch up. So Senator, we got 60 seconds. If a voter is listening to this interview and they don't know much about Greg Dolezal, what do you think the most important thing you'd like for them to walk away from this understanding is ahead of the runoff election?
I think that people and Republican primary voters want to see fighters. They are tired of people who campaign like Donald Trump and govern like Mitt Romney. And if you look at my record in the state Senate, I've been a junkyard dog fighter. I have not been afraid. I was one of 4 senators that stood with President Trump after the 2020 election. I'm the guy that went after Fonnie Willis. I'm the guy 2 weeks ago that sued Brad Raffensperger over the secret bunker where the election stuff was all coming into his staff. And so if you're looking for a fighter, you want to see Georgia referred to 8 years from now, not as a purple state. But if you want to hear people talk about us the way they talk about Florida, they call Florida the free state of Florida. My goal is to make the country talk about Georgia the way they talk about Florida. I want to be called the free state of Georgia.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for your time, Senator. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Senator Greg Dolezal, candidate for Lieutenant Governor of Georgia in our runoff election, which is taking place not too far from today. So make a plan, study the issues, listen and learn about the candidates, and make your voice heard at the ballot box. Senator, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, my friend. Good to talk to you always.
You as well. We'll continue to bring you conversations with candidates from across the political spectrum as the election season continues. I'm Taylor Hawkins, your host here on the Marc McMain Show, WMOQ. Thanks for joining us. We'll be right back after this short commercial break.
I chuckled at a cartoon that showed a news conference by a United States senator who announced that he was divorcing his family so he could spend more time with politics. We may laugh, but the truth is many people make that statement every day. Maybe not with words, but with their actions. In fact, if a politician retires from his work to spend more time with his family, it becomes the lead story met with cynicism on the evening news, while the one who rejects his family advancing his career is commonplace. God tells us we should work hard to the glory of God, but He has clearly shown that we must have priorities. A relationship with God first, and family follows that. What does your focus tell you about your priorities? The Bible says that we have brought nothing into this world and we can take nothing out of it. It's good to focus on the things that last, like putting God first, and then family, and then people all around us that God loves. This is Bryant Wright, speaking right from my heart.
Visit rightfromtheheart.org and click television to watch our TV spots. I'm former Congressman Jody Heiss, and we have a critical runoff election coming up on June 16th, and I want to urge you to get out and vote for Marc McMain for State Senate. Marc is a solid and trusted conservative. He'll defend our constitutional rights, support law enforcement, and fight for Georgia families. But dark money groups are now attacking Marc because they know he is the true conservative in this race. So don't stay at home, and let's all keep the main thing the McMain thing. Paid for by Marc for Georgia Incorporated.
Storm damage can shorten the life of your roof, and here at Joshua 19 Roofing, we make sure your home stays protected. We're more than just a roofing company servicing Georgia. We're committed Christians called to serve God by helping others. After this year's wind and hail storms, we've helped dozens of homeowners just like you start the insurance process for a full roof replacement. Visit joshua19roofing.com or call 770-701-9970 to schedule your completely free roof inspection and mention the Marc McMain Show for a $150 credit towards qualifying roofs.
John's Supermarket in downtown Monroe is proud to serve the Walton County community for over 50 years. 3 generations of the Thompson family offering the freshest produce, quality meats, everyday essentials, and now featuring Bistro South, a quick service restaurant with freshly made Southern cuisine and ready-to-heat gourmet meals. Always proud to support local farmers and suppliers, John's Supermarket has the best meat in town and tons of weekly specials. Stop by and see them for all the ingredients, meals, snacks, sweets, gifts, and everything in between you need.
Lake Life is the Lake Area's largest award-winning magazine, reaching over 25,000 readers. Pick up your copy of Lake Life magazine today. Get Lake Life free at over 100 convenient locations in Georgia's Lake Country. And keep in mind, you'll receive your free copy with a subscription to the Lake Oconee News or the Eatonton Messenger. Lake Life. It's all about the lives and events in Georgia's Lake Country. Call 706-485-3501 to subscribe. Lake Life, the biggest, the best, and it's free.
Welcome back to the Marc McMain Show. I'm your host, Taylor Hawkins. Folks, it was great to have on Greg Dolezal, who talked about a lot of issues that are near and dear to my heart in terms of his run for lieutenant governor here in the state of Georgia, but also in terms of the fight that we are in as a nation over which of the two basic competing ideologies are going to govern each state and going to govern the future of our country. And I think one of the amazing things that you see if you really drill down into it, and if you look at the candidates the different parties elevate, you will see a radicalism that is shaping up on the left that our nation has never really seen before. We have had communists run in the past, but the degree to which the modern Democratic Party, the degree to which the modern left is held capture by the radical ideologues at the far end of its political spectrum is really concerning. And to highlight that, I want to take a look at New Jersey race. In the 12th District of New Jersey, in this past Tuesday, you see a man who won. He's a plastic surgeon named Adam Hamaway, and he won the primary in New Jersey's 12th District. Okay, so a large majority of Democrat voters in a significant blue state in a significant area thought that this person is their best choice to govern them and to be their representative in Washington, D.C. Well, what's the problem with that? The problem with that is this is an individual with strong ties to Al-Qaeda who personally defended the blind sheik who was responsible for the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, in which 6 people were killed and over 1,000 were wounded. So we're talking about someone who defends our nation's chief enemies, people who use terrorism to kill Americans and try to enforce their will via terror on our nation. That person has just won a major primary inside the Democratic Party. Okay, so it is important, you'll hear a lot of both sidesism in political commentary, and it's something that really irritates me because it is an easy way to score cheap political points with people who are not actively engaged in politics. But once you get engaged in politics, and I know all of our listeners are not, and that's fine. That's fine. I don't think it's everyone's call to be hyper engaged or to be hyper aware, because the reality is you can't fix everything. So I often tell people, make sure the degree to which you listen to the news and get involved in politics from a media perspective is the degree to which you can actually make a difference. So make sure that when you're taking on the interests or the concerns that people are talking about in political media, I would encourage you to have an outlet for that. Get involved at the local level, get involved at the state level, but make sure that you're not just consuming the media, which honestly can have a bit of a doom and gloom effect upon you, leave you with a victim mentality. That's the last thing, of course, we want to do on this show. We want to bring you things that inform you and help you to understand the world we live in, help you to understand the political fights that are both our state faces as well as our nation. So again, going back to the issue that we're describing here, there's a lot of both sides in politics. A lot of people who try to say, well, but the left and right are both the same, they're going off the rails, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is that on the right, we see that conservative principles have remained largely unchanged for decades. Conservatives, both elected and at the grassroots level, believe in limited government, we believe in lower taxes, we believe in law and order, and we believe in the traditional family structure. Every single one of those things a mainstream Democrat 50 years ago would have at least understood if they didn't agree with all of them. And most of them they would have points of agreement on. In the modern Democrat Party, you will not find one significant individual nationwide who believes in those things who isn't attacked by their party. I mean, you've got a couple who are still partially sane, like John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, and I will avoid making the joke that you have to have mental problems in order to be a sane Democrat these days, because the gentleman unfortunately has suffered head trauma. But he is one of the lone figures who takes anything like a sane position, and is still an elected Democrat. So it's something that you have to understand, because I'm sure a lot of our listeners in this part of the state have relatives, friends, family who vote Democrat, either because they're not really all that politically engaged, or because the party has shifted and their friends and family have always voted Democrat. But today, the Democratic Party is not at all what it was 50 years ago. It has shown signs of changing. The change has not been immediate. It has shown signs of change. It's long since changed, and I'll highlight that when we talk about another race that's taking place here in the runoff in Georgia. But it hasn't been all that recent, but we're looking at a party today that elevates radicals, that elevates anti-Semitism, that completely denigrates even the idea of sound, sane, limited immigration, that completely disregards law and order, that prioritizes empathy for criminals over protection of law-abiding citizens, that believes that men can be women and women can be men, that men should have access to women's locker rooms and private spaces and sports just because they're confused about their own personal identity. I mean, we are talking about radicalism that has completely overtaken a party. And I don't want us to have to talk about politics all the time in this country, but the reality is that until our nation shifts back to the values that built the country, we are going to have to continue having these hard conversations. We're going to have to continue getting down deep to the real nature of things and understanding both from a practical surface level, but also from a first principles level, what is taking place and why it's important to stand up and fight back. So on a practical level, one of the things that you can do is you can get engaged in the elections that are happening right now. We have runoff elections here in the state of Georgia, and I know most of our listeners are from this great state, and you've been at least mostly involved, but the reality is that election season isn't over yet. It's not just waiting until November now for the general election. We have multiple runoff elections taking place here in Georgia, and one of those is for Secretary of State. And this is where I said I was going to bring it back to some things I was talking about, the shift in political parties. And my friend Tim Fleming is running against a person named Vernon Jones. And this is one where I have absolutely no qualms about talking about my preferences in this race, because it could not be more stark. It is night and day different, the two candidates in this race. Tim Fleming is someone who has served the state well, who has been accountable to the people of his district when he was in the House, and who was reachable, accessible, and a staunch conservative in all of his time in public office, versus someone who ran his county into the ground when he was DeKalb County CEO, someone who fired white people from his county on the basis of being white. So we have skin color, abject racism elevated inside of when he was the CEO of DeKalb County. He also, and we're talking about Vernon Jones now, of course, he also opposed the heartbeat bill. He was a vociferous voice in the state house against everything conservative in his time as an elected House member. And then since then, he has been a perennial candidate, just running for everything he thought he could possibly win. And it's just shameful to see his demagoguery actually take effect and be able to be competitive in a Georgia primary, especially statewide. But there are a lot of reasons for that, one of which is that he saw the political shift, and because he is a political opportunist and not a principled individual, and I will say that every day of the week and twice on Sundays, he switched parties from Democrat to Republican. He had duped as many Democrats as he couldn't win a race on that side of the aisle, so he switched parties and apparently switched all of his positions overnight, which you have to ask yourself why that is. Normal people don't do that. And then campaigned with Donald Trump to try to raise his own national and in-state reputation and name ID. And so it was a blatant personal political ploy. It had nothing really to do with helping the president or helping our great conservative movement. And so you have these two very stark contrasts. Someone who has served, not in exceedingly public positions his whole time in office. He was worked under Brian Kemp when he was the Secretary of State, then worked under him when he was governor for a short time, and then was an elected official, but has served the state for decades, versus someone who has served his own interest for decades. Someone who's credibly accused of assault. Someone who has just a history of double dealing, of lying. He's lied to me personally on numerous occasions that I won't get into on political issues. He is very bombastic, very caustic, and is just someone I think would represent our state horribly. I think he would do a terrible job as Secretary of State. So that's one of the ways that you can get involved, and you can make sure people like that don't take the reins of power here in Georgia, is by making sure you go to the polls and vote. So we are, like I said, in that runoff period. Early voting is June 8th through June 12th, which is next week. June 8th through June 12th, and then Election Day is June 16th. So please make a plan to go vote, and we'll talk a little bit more about elections and some other things that are happening around the country when we come back after this short commercial break. So stay with us, folks. I'm Taylor Hawkins, your host. This is The Marc McMain Show.
Have you been putting off auto repairs? Do you want a body shop you know and trust? Go see Auto Correct Collision. Auto Correct is a family-owned and operated collision center with over 45 years of experience. Their equipment and training exceed industry standards. No repair is too big or small. Ask about the special drawings and mention this ad for a discount. Visit Auto Correct Collision at 409 Mayfield Drive or call them at 770-207-1241.
Wait, did I hear you say the International Professional Rodeo Association awarded them the best outdoor rodeo in all of the U.S. of A?
That's right, Rusty. It's time again for the Shadydale Rodeo, June 5th and 6th.
Sponsored by the Masonic Lodges of Walton 200 and Jasper 50.
It's a night of clean family fun, bull riding, steer wrestling, barrel racing, and bronc riding.
And don't forget my favorite, the Kids Calf Scramble.
I'm going Saturday morning to take in the Shadydale Roundup Festival, beginning at 10 with the American Legion Parade starting at 3.
The 42nd Annual Shadydale Rodeo is sponsored by Pennington Seed, Hooper Trailer Sales, Ginn Jeep Chrysler Dodge, Hayes Tractor and Equipment, and Ace Home Center in Social Circle.
The Shadydale Rodeo.
Don't miss it, Friday and Saturday night, June 5th and 6th at 8 p.m.
Mind you, partner, get there early. Tickets are only sold at the gate.
Storm damage can shorten the life of your roof, and here at Joshua 19 Roofing, we make sure your home stays protected. We're more than just a roofing company servicing Georgia. We're committed Christians called to serve God by helping others. After this year's wind and hail storms, we've helped dozens of homeowners just like you start the insurance process for a full roof replacement. Visit Joshua19roofing.com or call 770-701-9970 to schedule your completely free roof inspection and mention the Marc McMain Show for a $150 credit towards qualifying roofs.
Stripling's General Store in Bogart reminds you that Father's Day is June the 21st. And you know dear old Dad would love a gift from Stripling's. You'll find great gift ideas, from gift boxes full of Dad's favorite things to gift cards. Fire up the grill with a juicy cut-to-order steak from the meat department. Plus, you'll find all the side dishes that make Dad's Day a special day. That's Stripling's General Store, Highway 78 East and Highway 53 in Bogart, wishing all dads a happy Father's Day.
Are you considering selling your house or land, or perhaps finding your dream home? Call Stacy McCullers, your trusted real estate expert with 12 years of experience and a lifelong connection to Walton County. Stacy is here to help you every step of the way. Whether you're buying or selling, she's available anytime to make your real estate journey smooth and successful. Don't wait. Call today, 678-859-6336. A member of Malcolm & Malcolm Realty Professionals, Stacy McCullers, your realtor for life.
Welcome back to the Marc McMain Show. This is your host, Taylor Hawkins. We've been talking about a lot about elections because Georgia is currently in a runoff, and there have been runoffs and elections across the nation over the last few weeks, and what they say about the future of our country is significant. So for the next few minutes before our next commercial break, I'm going to be talking about some things that have happened here in Georgia. And then after the commercial break in the last segment of the hour, we're going to talk about other things that are happening on a national level, what it says about perhaps President Trump's movement and his hold over the Republican Party, and his significance, I should say, in the Republican Party in terms of elections and endorsements. And we'll talk more about that after this. But first, I want to highlight the fact that here in our district, most of the listeners to this show I know are in the northeast section of Georgia, and we have a lot of candidates who came right here to our hometown area in Oconee for a stumping ground event just this past Monday, where the folks who are still in the runoff, still in the election, in the runoff for these different significant positions, everything from public service commissioner to lieutenant governor, and most of them were present and most of them participated in this forum where they got to answer questions from the audience and just kind of highlight their record and talk about why they are the best candidate. So I wanted to talk about that, both because it will be informative for our audience, but also because it hits close to home, and I'll highlight why in just a minute. But to get started, one of the things that they did was they took a straw poll, and the results of that, I believe, are relatively significant. You have the Public Service Commission race, and that is being run. The runoff, the GOP side runoff for the Public Service Commission race is between Bobby Meehan and Dr. Josh Tolbert, who is an engineer, who were both in attendance, both talked about data centers. Bobby was supportive of nuclear energy. Josh Tolbert was not. And Bobby sees that rates are a static issue. He said he thought we are going to see a decrease, and anything is better than nothing. And Josh highlighted his record as an engineer and talked about the change that he feels like that we need. And the straw poll results had Josh Tolbert running away, really. Bobby Meehan won 18% of those in attendance's vote for the position he's running for, Public Service Commission seat 5 here in Georgia. Josh Tolbert won 77%. So vast majority of those who cast their ballot. Next, we shift over to the school superintendent race. And this is significant because here in Georgia, almost half of every dollar spent by the state government is spent in education. And it's a huge number. Georgia has a roughly $37 billion budget, and close to, I believe, 45% of that is spent in education. And so we have our incumbent school superintendent who has served for 3 terms. His name is Richard Woods, and he is against Fred Bubba Longrear, who is a local superintendent in South Georgia. And so you have this kind of challenger versus incumbent debate that took place, and there's definitely a highlight of which candidates, the different candidates, very, very different positions. Of course, Richard is going to highlight his record, which he did, and he believes that he has done a good job. I will say that in my time in the legislature, while I think Richard himself is a good man, he was very absent from many of the conversations around education that took place. He was very difficult to reach. His office was very difficult to reach for legislators who wanted answers and who wanted to work on the issues that face education in our state. And so I personally am supporting Bubba Longrear in that election and urge you to do the same. Bubba won a vast majority of those in attendance as well, 82%. Richard Woods won 14%. And then Lieutenant Governor Greg Dolezal, who I had on the program earlier today, he was the only one in attendance, only candidate that showed, and he was talking about the different important things that are a core part of his campaign. Talked about some defended himself from some ads that are out there and some things that are being said, and also talked about his record on gambling, where he is a hard no for expanding gambling and casinos, horse racing, things of that nature in our state, as well as his view on property taxes, eliminating them as quickly as possible, and his move there. So the straw poll results there, where, of course, in that race you have a runoff between State Senator John F. Kennedy from Macon, Georgia, and State Senator Greg Dolezal from Forsyth County. Greg Dolezal won 62%, and John F. Kennedy won 35%. And then you had Tim Fleming versus Vernon Jones. Vernon shared about his campaign towards the end of the event, and Vernon got very frustrated with different lines of questioning, and I'm not surprised by that. As I mentioned before the commercial break, he is not someone I'm very fond of, nor do I think he has a very good handle on what it means to be an elected official and someone who should live the values that they proclaim to be protecting. But Tim Fleming won 67% of the straw poll at the Oconee County Stumping Ground event, and Vernon won 24%. All right, that brings me to what I believe is the more important part of that event, which was that Doug McKillop, an attorney from Athens, Georgia, is running against Marc McMain, who, that's a name you know, right? This is the Marc McMain Show. And I'm not talking about that because Marc is a friend or because he owns this radio show. I'm talking about it because I am personally passionate about seeing good candidates elevated to office here in Georgia. We need people who are focused, who are men of integrity, men and women of integrity, who can serve the people of their district well. And unfortunately, at this event, when Doug and Marc were up on stage together, Doug really launched into some wholly unnecessary and uncalled for attacks against Marc. Up until this point, I feel like they had been running a reasonably not contentious race up until the last couple of weeks, but Doug is now leveling accusations against Marc about gambling, which is not true. I'll get to that in a second. And also said some pretty nasty things about our local sheriffs. There are 3 sheriffs in the counties that Marc's district, or the district that Marc will represent, overlap in. Each one of those sheriffs is tremendously popular, and each one of those sheriffs is seeing the problem on the ground that we have of the rise in mental health issues that law enforcement primarily deals with. So, of course, that's one of the number one issues that they care about. And Marc is someone who has cared a lot about this community, even before he was involved in politics. And he has a close relationship with those sheriffs because he cares about the problems that they see in this district. And so because they know he cares, because they have seen his integrity and the way he deals with political issues and policy matters, those sheriffs all have a very strong view of Marc, and so they've endorsed him in this race. And in order to get around that endorsement, or to basically to try to minimize it in whatever way he could, Doug actually acted as though and made a claim that the sheriffs and Marc were in some sort of pay-to-play scheme to elevate Marc, which it's pretty disgusting, if you ask me. I mean, if you disagree with somebody on a political issue, highlight the policy disagreement and why you think you're right. We do not need more ad hominem attacks in politics. The level at which political discourse is in this country is so low, and that is highlighted every election cycle, and is really something that I think that makes me mad, and I know most of the listeners to this show mad as well. Because sometimes it feels like you're just listening to 2 grown adults shout at each other like kids. And I will say, now, I think Marc was very disciplined in his response to that, and talked about the reasons that was ridiculous. We need mental health taken care of. We need additional. It is one of the few things that I think government should do, is to create policies to try to work with this issue, because it's something that our government is already dealing with in social services and law enforcement, etc. And so that was completely uncalled for. I was very disappointed to hear that. And I mean, the reality is, folks, that Doug is a person who was a Democrat, hardcore Democrat, switched to Republican in 2010 after a conversion he had to Christianity, and that's wonderful. I'm not going to put him down for that at all. But then he voted Democrat in the presidential preference primary in 2020, and that's strange. And while he was in the House as a Democrat, he voted with Stacey Abrams against property tax relief, and so I don't think there's any guarantee that the voters have that he is not going to be someone who can be trusted. I really don't. And so, again, Marc McMain is a friend of mine. He was also smeared about, so-called support for gambling. And let me tell you, folks, this is not me trying to toot my own horn. there are very few, I can count on one hand the number of people who have been as vocal in their opposition to gambling expansion in this state as I have. In my 5 years as a lobbyist at the Capitol, I got up in no less than 3 or 4 dozen committee meetings to talk about the dangers that gambling expansion poses to this state. We do not need casinos to bring crime into the state. We do not need horse racing, which ends up being a suck on the taxpayer dollar. We do not need more online sports betting, which is highly predatory and dangerous for individuals and highly addictive. We don't need any of that. And Mark is a friend of mine, so we've had those conversations, and I know he does not support gambling expansion. But because some people who do have apparently seen that he is a more reasonable person than Doug and have supported him, Doug is now circulating ads and mailers and all kinds of things trying to connect him with Stacey Abrams and Keisha Lance Bottoms and gambling expansion and bringing casinos to Georgia. Well, Doug knows that's not where Mark stands. So what I'm telling you is Doug is taking positions in this race that are openly deceptive on purpose just to win the race. And again, this has been a mostly cordial race up until the last few weeks. I'm very sad to see it turn this direction. But it's one thing that I wanted to highlight because I know a lot of listeners to this show are in Senate District 46 here in Northeast Georgia, and it's an important issue. So be aware of that as you go to the polls for the runoff for here, our local state Senate District 46. Be aware of that. We're going to come back after this short commercial break and talk about a few more elections that have taken place nationwide and what those mean for the future of the conservative movement. But again, stay informed, stay engaged. The Republican runoff and the runoffs in both the Republican and the Democrat side are coming up on June 16th. It's just 2 weeks away, so please make a plan to go vote. Continue to be informed about the candidates and make your voice heard. We'll be right back after this.
Hey, listen, it's that Rick Jackson again.
Too often, criminal illegals commit sick, violent crimes. Do that when I'm governor, and you'll end up deported or departed.
Dang. I know, right?
What do you have, Sugar?
I'll take the meatloaf and Rick Jackson for governor.
He's something, ain't he?
Oh, he's tough.
No tolerance for criminal illegals, no woke ideology.
No more do-nothing career politicians.
The man escaped the projects and built one of Georgia's most successful businesses. Plus, he's big-time pro-Trump.
And he wants to cut our property taxes. Like for real.
Shush, y'all. Here comes the good part.
No more free rides for people who refuse to work. You want to sit on your butt, binge watch Netflix, and scarf down Cheetos? Do it with your own money.
Amen to that.
Conservative Rick Jackson for Georgia.
I just love that Cheetos part.
Paid for by Jackson for Governor, Inc.
Storm damage can shorten the life of your roof, and here at Joshua 19 Roofing, we make sure your home stays protected. We're more than just a roofing company servicing Georgia. We're committed Christians called to serve God by helping others. After this year's wind and hail storms, we've helped dozens of homeowners just like you start the insurance process for a full roof replacement. Visit Joshua19roofing.com or call 770-701-9970 to schedule your completely free roof inspection and mention the Marc McMain Show for $150 credit towards qualifying roofs.
Hey y'all, this is Bethany, owner of Willfully Guided Co. Boots and Western Apparel. From durable work boots built for long days to statement pieces ready for Saturday night and everything in between, we've got the brands that feel just right for everyone in the family. Stop by and see why we're your one-stop shop. Willfully Guided Co. Boots and Western Apparel is located at 116 South Broad Street, right in the heart of downtown Monroe. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok to keep up with all the fun events happening with Willfully Guided Co. and for previews of all of our newest merchandise.
Anytime is a great time to make memories at the Yellow River Wildlife Sanctuary in Lilburn. Close to home and fun for the entire family. Not only will you see wildlife up close, like bears, otters, bison, and more, you can enjoy a picnic lunch. There's gem mining and so much more. The Yellow River Wildlife Sanctuary, 4525 Highway 78 in Lilburn. Make plans to visit soon. To learn more, go to yellowriverwildlifesanctuary.com.
Welcome back to the Marc McMain Show. I'm your host, Taylor Hawkins, and we're going to get into a number of things in our last closing minutes of this radio hour today. One of the things I wanted to talk about is I want to highlight something that Senator Greg Dolezal, when he's on the program earlier for our interview regarding his race for lieutenant governor, he talked about the war on the West that is taking place. Talked about the reality that we are in an ideological battle for the future of our nation. There are people in this country, a vast majority of them, I believe, who love this nation, who love what it means, who love the values that it represents, who love the fact that we have been a force for justice, largely speaking, across the globe in the last 250 years, who are proud of what it means to be an American, and who are proud of the history that our country has. And unfortunately, they do not represent the totality of Americans. There is a significant, and it feels like growing and very vocal and noisy minority in America who hate this country, and when I say they hate this country, they're asking for leadership of this country. They're trying to sway political voices and the voices of the culture in this country, but they hate the values we stand for. They speak against and smear the history of this nation, and they talk bad about those who defend it. And so I'm not willing to stand on the sidelines when those figures try to elevate themselves either in political power or any other institutional level of leadership in this nation, and then try to use those platforms to denigrate our country. I'm just not willing to do it. And I bring this up because it was fascinating to see Congressman Brandon Gill, who's just a very sharp guy, and I'm sure he has a continued future and potentially even a higher future at the national level in the future. But Brandon Gill, he's leading a House task force on uncovering and eliminating Medicaid fraud, which is being abused. And Luke Rosiak over the Daily Wire has highlighted this with some just massive breaking news about the billions and billions of dollars which have been siphoned off by individuals who are abusing the system to just an unbelievable degree, and the just epic scale of waste and fraud that is taking place. So he held a hearing to highlight that. And while Luke from the Daily Wire is talking about his reporting, what he's uncovered, and different things like that, a Democrat congresswoman who was not even on the committee crashed the hearing, absolutely incensed that it would be uncovered that immigrants to this nation comprise the vast bulk of those committing the fraud. So get that. Instead of being worried that hardworking Americans are being ripped off, the government is taking their money and then fraudulently spending it, fraudulently wasting it by giving money to people who are lying to the government about the service, who they are and the services they provide. Instead of being incensed on behalf of American taxpayers, she is incensed and crying racist that anyone would even talk about the fact that these individuals are not from the United States. That is so foolish and so un-American. It just is. And I'm not going to pretend not to be outraged that kind of person, instead of taking the side of the American citizens who have been cheated and the taxpayers' dollars that have been wasted, she's going to take the side of the immigrants to this country who clearly don't care for the system and for the people that they are abusing. That is absolutely shameful. I mean, the reporting that Luke was highlighting, based on published data from the federal government themselves and what can be found out by looking at the public record of the owners of these LLCs the federal government has been paying to provide quote-unquote medical services, I should say, Luke Rosiak found multiple cases, many instances of criminal records. So these are people who clearly do not care for the society in which they live, who have abused the privilege that the United States has afforded to them. And just to highlight that, this Democrat rep from Ohio, who when Congressman Gill asked, I wonder, is mass migration actually good for Ohio and good for America? Democrat rep, she literally teared up and talked about the evil of that kind of question. And that's absurd. Any public policy position of the United States and any public policy position of any government official should be able to be criticized, and we should be able to have the conversation about whether or not it's good without someone on one side of the aisle or the other claiming the moral high ground and acting like it's racist to even consider the idea, or it is abusive to even question the public policy. That's ridiculous. That is absurd. But the reality is that is the position of most on the Democrat side. So it's very sad to see. But I want to end on some good news. So we're gonna get to some good news real quick, and that is that Donald Trump issued an executive order just the other day, which is going to return some workforce accountability to the federal workforce, and it is something that is phenomenal to see because it is long needed, long overdue. But what it basically does is it says that unelected, unaccountable, permanent civil servants in the bureaucracy can't make decisions that go against the direction of the president and against the direction of the duly elected executive officers without actually facing accountability for their actions. In other words, up until this point, I mean, most people know this because it has been highlighted in many media accounts. Donald Trump and his administration have tried to fire those people who are undermining his administration's attempts to enact the public policy they were elected to enact. There are many in the civil service and the federal government who are undermining that and who are trying everything they can to prevent him from doing what he was elected to do. And it's been very difficult to find those people and to fire those people and to bring real accountability. So this executive order, which does have solid legal precedent, will hopefully curtail some of that. And I hope we'll see some people fired. And in case you're wondering, like, well, is it a bad thing that we now live in a system where whoever, is elected president, now it's winner take all and that person just is gonna be able to, well, folks, the Constitution guarantees that the executive branch should serve at the will of the president. So it is just constitutional to make sure that the branch full of unelected bureaucrats actually has accountability to the people of the United States who are electing its chief officers. So that is not a bad thing. That is totally consistent with conservative principles for him to do this and for him to make it easier to fire those in the federal government who do not do what the president asks of them. That should be true regardless of which side has control of the White House. When the people's voice at the ballot box is heard, then the executive officials who fill those roles should be able to carry out what the president wishes. And so I'm hopeful we'll see some significant changes in the federal bureaucracy because of that. So that's just some of the good news that we have on a national level. I talked earlier about elections both in Georgia and across the nation. There's a lot to be proud of, a lot to be happy about, and a lot to be concerned about as well. And so take both your positivity and your concerns, and please go to the ballot box. Once again, I'll say it for the last time as we close this hour. It is very important that you stay engaged, that your voice is heard in this election cycle because it's not done yet. The primary runoffs here in Georgia are taking place June 16th is Election Day, and June 8th through the 12th is early voting. So go to the My Voter page, Georgia My Voter page, and find out where you're supposed to vote. And get out there and make sure your voice is heard in this election. Make sure we select the best candidate possible to go up against the Democrat in November. And we'll be back next week to talk more about both elections and what we're seeing in the runoff. Thanks so much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Marc McMain Show. I have been your host, Taylor Hawkins, and I appreciate your time.